Welcome to the hoping and praying version of the MMA Vivisection this week. This is Zane Simon, and I am seriously just over here kind of begging on bended knee that this show does not crap itself, which, given my track record, is a serious concern. Tried to do a Vivisection for Bellator last night, and the Lord of Fisticuffs said, "Nay, thou shalt not discuss fights," and canceled the whole thing with crappy Hangouts problems. But today we seem to be running fairly well. I am joined by Connor Rebish, and we are here to talk UFC 197 and a card that is still interesting, but slightly less interesting than the fight that is going on inside the UFC right now.
Yeah, if the god of MMA nowadays, at least the god of the MMA zeitgeist, is Conor McGregor, then I can see why he chose to cancel your Bellator Vivisection. Because if people aren't even caring about UFC 197 with the return of John Jones and potentially the greatest fighter in the sport today on the same card, then damn sure they're not going to care about Ben Henderson on some Bellator card. They are not. So Conor McGregor has decreed that for the next few weeks, it'll be a tough world for us technical analysts to get buy-in.
Yeah, well, I at least, I think people, if I were, perhaps, if I'm Demetrious Johnson, I'm actually pretty happy right now because the distraction from this card, I don't think it'll actually stop people from buying this card. It just means that there's less focus on any PR work he has to do for it. In general, The UFC is probably a hotter commodity now, in general, just overall, because of this Conor McGregor thing. People are hearing about that and they're like, oh, and there's a fight on this weekend. I guess I'll watch that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think, it's, I think I want people to take this seriously because I like technique, and that's what I do is I talk about fighting technique, but we do not watch fights because of technique. You know what I mean? I have seen some great fights with a lot of meaning and great action and drama that were sloppy as all hell. And I've seen some technical masterpieces that, even if I enjoyed them because they were so technical, I forgot about them a week later. We're here for narrative and for story. So that's why Conor McGregor is such an important figure nowadays. I do think there are some interesting narratives on this card, but, quite frankly, there's nothing here that compares with what's going on with McGregor, so I'm not surprised. I'm a little disappointed, though, because I was pretty pleased with the article I put out today, and nobody cares. It's all about Conor McGregor.
It's true. It's true. On that note, though, too, I think the other thing about this card that, technically at least, is it's a cool card. It's fun. It should be a fun card to watch. I think it'll be a great card to watch. But it is not the most technical card in the world in terms of how we're getting into the nitty gritty of it. There's a lot of very simple, bold overall themes going on in each fight where it's like, well, this person's been fighting 5 times longer, so they're probably going to win. Or this person is way, 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 way more technical, so they're probably going to win.
Yeah. Although, you know what? Now that you say that, I think there are probably a few where we will disagree, despite what we said before we began recording. So maybe we can get into it and
you gonna throw some hot takes at me?
Yeah, I might have some hot takes. Hashtag hot takes for you on UFC 197, and then just so it gets read, hashtag UFC 200.
Oh yeah, that's right. Just to make sure people are actually watch.
Gotta get the clickbait in there.
That's right. Conor McGregor and UFC 197.
There we go. Yeah. Will Conor McGregor be cage side during the event? Who knows?
That's right.
Read on to not find out.
Okay, on that note, let's talk about what I think is honestly the toughest fight for me to pick on this whole card. Efrain Escudero versus Kevin Lee. Even looking at the other fights up the card that have some challenging points to them, this is a fight where I'm just kind of like, I have no clue who wins this fight at all. Take it away.
Head scratcher. I think that's why it's a great fight, and I think it's a perfect Fight Pass fight because I think I noted a while back that they seem to be putting hardcore interest fights on Fight Pass. Now they've done a few quite bigger ones, but I like when they open the card with this. Like, it's a fight that has relevance. It gives me a reason to watch early. It's got some story, some narrative in it. Efren Escudero's had many ups and downs throughout his career. He's back in the UFC. He's one of the most experienced veterans in the lightweight division, and to hang around in this division as long as he has is a really tough thing indeed. I mean, lightweight is as deep as it gets, and Escudero's still there, and he's still doing pretty well. And Kevin Lee, really talented prospect, but maybe not one with that kind of next level fight-changing ability to easily beat a guy like Escudero. You know what I mean? He's not going to be the legend killer. Not that Escudero is much of a legend. I think the really big X factor in this fight is that Efren Escudero has never been knocked out. Has never been knocked out. He is crafty, and he is very durable. And he will play it safe if he needs to avoid being hurt, but he is not easy to put away, and that means more time for him to figure out a way to beat Kevin Lee, and there are still ways to beat Kevin Lee. He may not be as durable as he could be. We saw him get knocked out in his last fight by
Leonardo
Santos, who dropped him with a lovely right hand. Lee is maybe still a little too confident in his athletic prowess, and he's probably the more athletic guy here in terms of strength and explosiveness, but I don't think he's a dynamite puncher. He's not an incredible wrestler with great takedown ability. Escudero and Lee are both pretty well-rounded, and Escudero's more experienced. So I think as long as Escudero can weather the first round, his chances get better. But I also think that Lee is faster. He puts out a lot more volume. And the thing is, Escudero may not be finishable, but he's not a great finisher either. He's not going to put away a lot of guys with a single punch. He can box well, but he's also always a little inconsistent. I think sometimes he goes into risk mitigation mode, where he's less worried about winning and more about just surviving long enough to maybe try a gamble. And I don't think that'll work for him against Kevin Lee, but I think provided he gets out of the first round, it will be close. I'm picking Kevin Lee, but a lot of caveats there.
Yeah, a lot. There's definitely other than a couple of first-round submissions, let's see, 2 in the last 6 years. Efren Escudero's only first-round knockout is over Cole Miller. So, and that was back in 2009. So it has been, Efren Escudero is not necessarily a dangerous fighter early at all. And he's also been out, been outworked by guys like Dakota Cochran and Jorge Patino and latter-day Tyson Griffin,
Yeah, latter-day Tyson Griffin. It's a good one.
It's just he's got the ability to just be outworked by somebody. And that's Kevin Lee's best chance here, is definitely to outwork him. But I think the thing that is giving me some pause is definitely that idea of we did just see a guy get knocked out by Leonardo Santos. That's not a dude that is out there icing fools,
Granted, I think Santos has gotten markedly better as a striker, but the point stands. It's not a great knockout loss to suffer. All things considered.
No, it's really not. And what I went back and watched that fight, and what you saw was Kevin Lee is very confident in his abilities, and yet he tends to enter on really straight lines when he strikes, and he tends to enter with his head up and online when he strikes. So he's coming in with his head up, and he got knocked out trying to lead with a rear uppercut with his head online, coming in straight. And, how good a striker does Efren Escudero have to be to take advantage of that?
But that's the thing. I know Leonardo Santos is not a great hitter either, but the chances of Leonardo Santos doing that again are still pretty slim. Of just one-shotting Kevin Lee, I think they're still pretty slim. And so without that kind of punching power, Efren Escudero may not even hit as hard as Leonardo Santos. He's not a hard hitter.
He did get beat by Leonardo Santos as well in a pretty ugly decision.
Yeah. He's not a power puncher.
I just don't know that Lee can put together the kind of performance that outworks Efrain Escudero. That's my problem, is that he's kind of he's more confident than he is technical, and so he tends to leave a lot of openings. Like there was a point in that Leonardo Santos fight too where he just like stood in front of Santos with his arms out like, come at me, bro, and Santos just double legged him through the canvas. It's just like, man, you cannot be that confident without the points to back it up.
Yeah, I respect the swagger, but it can be an issue.
Yeah, I do too. It's just, I don't know. I really want to pick Lee, but I'm going to pick Escudero to kind of eke this out on a veteran decision, and I really want Lee to show up and win it, so I'm feeling bad about that pick. The odds on that fight are Efrain Escudero is a massive underdog, plus 320 down to plus 270 or 260. Kevin Lee is a massive favorite, minus 351 up to minus 400, and I would love to know why.
No clue. I think Escudero is not a bad bet at all at those odds.
Yeah, I mean, it's just Escudero wins a decision, which is like 99% of the way he wins is plus 505.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be hard for me to resist that bet, if I'm being honest.
I mean, like, I can see why Lee would be the favorite. He's a little faster. He's a bit, he's stronger.
I think he should be favored. I mean, he has momentum on his side, even being stopped. Like, that's a prospect loss. He's fought a much more experienced guy with new wrinkles in his game, and he's still very young and very inexperienced. And I think
he's still very young and inexperienced, and he just got stopped.
Yes, exactly. Like, you can excuse the loss, but with the same logic that excuses the loss doesn't net him minus 375 odds on his next fight.
Minus 400. You can get him. He's minus 400. That's just that's crazy. So
it's a lot.
That to me on a fight that I think could end up being a coin flip decision in which you get a lot of close, sloppy rounds where Lee gives away a lot of momentum, playing around or coming in with some poor defense and getting clipped and getting open exchanges. I would not feel confident in that at all. All right, that brings us to the next bout, light heavyweight fight, Marcos Rogerio de Lima versus Clint Hester. And this is, I don't know. I want to feel like this is a close, tough fight to pick because both these guys are so very willing to give fights away. But I kind of got to go with Rogerio de Lima here just by being the more natural light heavyweight who has the confidence in his power. Like, he's a fighter who is very able still to sit down in front of somebody and just swing away at them with power shots. And what I saw of Clint Hester in that Vitor Miranda fight is a guy who's looking to become a wrestler and top control player to try and negate those kinds of battles and is not very good at it. Like, he got really tired really early and then just kind of got out-wrestled and outworked by Miranda. And Rogerio de Lima is not that technical, but he's so big and strong that I just don't see Hester, I don't see that being a path forward for Hester. And if it's just a straight striking exchange, Hester is faster and he can hit hard, but he has never shown himself to be the kind of consistent, dominant striker that I feel like I can just trust to put Rogerio de Lima away. So I'm going with Rogerio de Lima, maybe by first round, second round knockout.
Both these guys have a little bit of that going for them, right? Because if you'll recall, Marcos Rogerio de Lima's last fight against Eat, Pray, Cry, Love.
Thrill.
Yeah, Eat, Cry, Love. He went in there and got taken down, went for a guillotine and couldn't get it, stood back up, and jumped guard for a second guillotine. And then kind of quit. You know what I mean? Like, he kind of looked like he didn't really want to be there anymore. Like, the choke if I recall, was in it for like a second, and he's like, and he looked like he was tired. So I kind of worry that maybe Clint Hester, even though he fights against type and he seems to have stamina issues, I kind of think that Hester is probably tougher than Rogerio de Lima. I think he can take more of a beating, and maybe I kind of get the sense that de Lima is maybe a bit of a bully, a bit of a front runner, and I don't think Hester is quite as much. He's won some tough fights before, and I think Hester's stamina might be helped by the move up to light heavyweight. Thing is that de Lima is really big and really strong and really powerful, and Hester's been knocked out in both of his last 2 fights. So I kind of think like a first round KO will happen for de Lima, but if it goes beyond that, I think Hester's chances of winning this fight go up incrementally as the clock runs out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would love to see Hester, like, this move to light heavyweight really serve him well and help him with his cardio and stuff like that. It's also worth noting too that, for both these guys, the fighters they fought last time out, Vitor Miranda and Nikita Krylov, are 2 of the absolute most no-quit fighters out there.
It's true, yeah.
Like, they are seriously, Krylov especially, is just will not go away for anything.
They're the slightly more well-rounded Fabio Maldonados.
Yep.
Basically.
And then we've seen from Miranda over and over again now that you have to really actually put him away to beat him.
Weirdly, Vitor Miranda has solidified himself as a serious gatekeeper in the middleweight division. Like, he is a tough bastard.
So, both these guys wilted against really tough fighters, and it'll be weird to see them fight each other, where it's going to be a big question of does somebody go away first? Does somebody wilt first? Or does Marcos Rogerio de Lima just get a big KO early? So, the odds on that fight, Rogerio de Lima is a favorite, -129 to -140. Clint Hester, the underdog, +118 to +105. I think those are pretty good, reasonable odds, given both guys' problems in the past and de Lima not being the one moving up a division and not having the history of repeated bad knockout losses. So, on that point, we move up to the Fight Pass main event, Walt Harris versus Cody East.
Yeah, I was really excited for Cody East to come into the UFC. He looks really good. He has a lot of promise. He seems pretty fast for a heavyweight. He throws a lot of volume. He's tough, and he's now at Jackson Winklejohn, so we got some serious potential for improvement, especially with that kind of athletic ability at heavyweight. They're going to know how to work with that. And then I kind of learned that he's like a trash fire of a human being.
Yep.
So, child abuse charges, sexual assault, and rape, and just, I can't ever say someone's a definite bad person when it's just charges, but when you have a lot of charges with very similar allegations against you, you start to get into
he spent time in prison on the child abuse.
Yeah, you get into Bill Cosby territory, and Cosby never even went to jail. So, Cody East, it's hard to root for him, which makes me really want to root for Walt Harris, but I just think Walt Harris does not have what it takes to beat East. He's fast and athletic. He seems to have some good pop, but I think he really does not have that marriage between defense and offense. Where he's either attacking in spurts or he gets hit and then he backs off for a minute, 2 minutes doing nothing. And East can be hit and he can be hurt, but he is pretty relentless. He keeps coming. He keeps looking for openings even after he's been rocked. Or if he doesn't get rocked, he pours on the volume. He's a very effective, attritive fighter. So I think East's going to win. My sincere hope is that working at Jackson Winklejohn turns his life around, but look how it worked out for John Jones. So I'm not holding out any serious hopes.
Even if you don't want to go with John Jones, you can always Diego Brandao is not exactly the success of working with Jackson Wink and turning his life around.
Even then, Diego Brandao just pistol whipped some dude.
That's what I mean.
Cody East shit is worse.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, the thing with Harris is he doesn't have the durability of a heavyweight, and you can't be a not durable heavyweight. Like,
No.
that is the deciding factor in what makes you a heavyweight is durability. Everything else is second to that, you know? So Pelele survived in the UFC heavyweight division with very little other than hugeness and durability, you know? Or Jake or Jared Rosholt too. Like,
I will say, in his fight with Walt Harris, so Pelele actually seemed to have finally made some boxing improvements.
Yeah, you know.
But the durability is what got him there. Same with Ben Rothwell.
Yeah.
Same with Junior Dos Santos, who may very well be on the cusp of a resurgence, at least if he gets more favorable matchups, because unless you can take Cain Velasquez-style beatings, it's really hard to keep developing in this division.
Yeah. So Walt Harris, you know, I would love to see him do well, but I don't see it. And for Cody East, I just hope, you know, I hope we hear a lot about him talking about how much his life has changed, because that's kind of the thing that I would like to hear more of is guys who aren't just kind of, you know, who come in under these circumstances, who can really spend some time being like, hey, let me talk about what happened and what I've done to turn it around, rather than being like, oh, that's all in the past. Don't look at that.
Right.
You don't need to see anything over there.
It's a lot easier to get behind a guy and have a sense of forgiveness for him when he goes the Alexander Gustafsson route or the Will Cope route and not the Anthony Johnson route, where he kind of still seems like an asshole and he's like, why are you bringing all that stuff that I did in the past up? It doesn't matter anymore. Like, dude, it matters. It really matters.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's going to hang over Cody East for a while, but he's still a big favorite. He still deserves to be a favorite here, and he is not a big one, probably not as big a one as he should be, but he comes in at minus 150 to minus 165 odds, and Walt Harris in at plus 143 down to plus 120. Maybe there's a little bit of this like tentativeness now around picking or looking for a fighters, because they all seem to be these really like flashy, exciting dudes that the UFC grabs and then end up getting outworked just by some grinder. But Walt Harris is not that grinder.
I'm happy for the odds. BRB just placing a quick bet on Cody East.
Yeah. That's he's tough and odds. He works in volume. The biggest thing for him going forward, I noticed, is that he tends to get pretty off balance if he has to really start striking in combination, which against some of the more durable, tough heavyweights could mean that he'll end up getting thrown on his back. Mm-hmm. But that's not this fight.
No.
So that brings us to the FS1 prelims, and first bout, Glaico França versus James Vick. And I gotta know I don't know what the deal is with James Vick and getting like fights. He's become the dude that derails every half decent prospect without ever being thrown any further up the ladder at all.
Nope.
And he doesn't fight often enough to build any momentum either.
Nope. Now he just comes in, ruins some young fighter's best laid plans, and fades into the distance until the next promising fighter emerges.
Exactly. It's like once every year, James Vick is going to come out and wreck some dude's shit and then go away. And it'll never be like, you know, he's not fighting Marbek Taisimov or,
nope.
You know, even like Evan Dunham. He's not getting like anywhere near the top 15. He's still facing a dude who's just come off his UFC debut, albeit a tough winning debut, but still like not a fighter anybody cares about at all.
He's not climbing the ladder. He's hanging around the 6th or 7th rung behind the ladder with a knife just to stab anyone who tries to get past that point.
And I think he's absolutely going to do it here. França is a really good he's a good young prospect. He's a great athlete. He's big. He's got long limbs. He's powerful. He's aggressive. But that's also kind of who Jake Matthews was. And James Vick is big and durable. And his game isn't complete, but it's really, really dangerous in these very specific areas. And Franca's exactly the kind of guy who's going to come out, throw a couple punches at Vick, land him, and be like, I'm having great success. I'll dive in on a takedown, and then get wrecked. So
Yeah.
I'm picking James Vick probably by submission. Maybe even just by close, sloppy decision via Valmir Lazaro mode.
Mm. Like all of the guys that James Vick fights, I could totally see Glaico Franca beating him. Like he has the tools to do it. You know, he's very good, even though all of them have absolute puff-filled records. Most of the fighters that come out of Astra Fight Team into the UFC seem pretty solid. I think Darren Till, at the very least, solidified his status as a solid prospect. Franca's record is basically means nothing, but the win over Fernando Bruno was solid. And I think he can continue to get good wins. He seems to be a very talented fighter, and it's okay. In boxing, lots of talented fighters have 20-0 fights before their managers feel they're confident enough to move up. So he's got a ton of potential. If he fights James Vick from range, if he uses his movement and sticks him with long straight punches and low kicks, he could totally beat him. James Vick is really only very effective in the pocket. He uses his height pretty well. He's got some nice counter knees, some good uppercuts, a decent right hand on breaks, but he doesn't have a lot of diversity to his game, to what he does. And at range, he can totally be picked apart. But in close, he's got the guillotine and the back takes and the short strikes. And Glaico Franca, inexperienced as he is, has so far never really won a meaningful fight without using his grappling. Even against Fernando Bruno, he grappled a lot. And Bruno was a guy who basically needed to grapple to win. So I think Franca's going to go in there. He's going to try to grapple with Vick, and I think he's going to get guillotined later in the fight, probably after he tires out, because I think he's a little better, a little savvier on the submission defense than some of the other guys Vick has beaten. But I think a third-round submission for Vick feels about right.
Yeah, it definitely has that feeling. It's just a weird fight. Like, I don't know what the UFC's plan with Vick is. They're just like, hey, go fuck up some prospects, and then we won't promote you.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I could see Franco winning this fight. I think it deserves to have fairly close odds. But until Vick doesn't beat a prospect, I'm just going to keep picking him.
Yep. Odds are Vick is the favorite, -170 to -190. Glaico Franca, the underdog, +161 down to +145. That feels a little short, but pretty reasonable. Franca is a good prospect. He is a good athlete. He is well-rounded. Vick is just, he's just standing there with a knife, and it's the way it is.
Vick inside the distance is +130. I don't really think that's actually enough to make it really tempting to risk it.
No, Vick has too many holes in his game still to just be like, yeah, he's absolutely going to dominate this dude, and you should pick him every time. It's just like, no, he's probably going to win.
That's the thing. Vick is like the very poor man's version of Anthony Pettis, who'll be talking about later. Like, he can totally be losing a fight and not doing well, and then just pull out a sudden win. And he seems to do it with consistency, but you never feel like he's reliable.
Like, I honestly thought Nick Hine beat James Vick just with only throwing right hands. Like, that was the only thing Hine threw, and he came really close to beating Vick.
Left hands, I think you'll find. I'm not sure Nick Hine has a right hand.
No, it was only throwing left hands. You're right. I forgot that he was a southpaw, but it's like only throwing single power shots all fight, and he almost beat him.
Yep.
So
it's like if a lot of the prospects Vick has fought didn't try to grapple with him, they would beat him. Yep. But they all try.
I got a fly over here. Damn it. 2 flies now. Shit. Okay, that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about Carla Esparza, Juliana Lima. Take it away. I think consequences among fans seem to be stronger for female fighters. Like, Bethe Correia gets destroyed by Ronda Rousey. She's trash. Of course, she vindicated herself last weekend. Same for Tisha Torres. She has boring fights. She's garbage. She obviously vindicated herself last week and had a really good argument for beating Rose Namajunas, who everyone loves because she's exciting. Same with Carla Esparza. Like, she gets wrecked by Ioane and Jacek, and I think everyone just now thinks that she's nobody. Like, she has no talent. Like, the odds on this fight are very surprisingly close to me, given the matchup. Because I think Lima's solid, but Lima's low volume. She's not amazingly powerful, and she has fought absolutely zero good offensive wrestlers in the UFC. And Carla Esparza is legitimately a very good offensive wrestler. Ioane and Jacek
didn't stop her takedowns, because Carla Esparza is not good at getting them. That was like one of the most marked improvements Joanna Jędrzejczyk had ever made up to that point in her career. We all picked Carla Esparza over her because we thought Carla would use that chain wrestling ability that she's so well known for. Other parts of her game are a little clunky, but she's gritty. She sticks and moves a lot. She's kind of a female Frankie Edgar. Yeah, she can be hit, she can be hurt, but I dare you to outwork her for 3 or 5 rounds, and I dare you to stop her takedowns and to stop the punches she lands after you worry about the takedowns. She's very well-rounded in that regard, and I think she's pretty much a lock to win this fight.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with me is, on the flip side of that too, I do think that Juliana Lima is sort of chronically underrated as well. Like,
that's fair,
she's hovering around like ranked 14th in the division or something, and it's just like, I realize she is not an exciting fighter to watch at all, but she's probably one of the top 3 wrestlers in that division offensively. It's like her, Esparza, and Gadella, and that's at least for offensive wrestling. The problem with it is that she is basically a zero offense fighter. Like, there is no definitive offense from her in her game.
Yeah,
she can be hit. She's known as like Jutai. She's a Muay Thai striker, and her striking on the feet is just non-existent, and she can get tagged up by almost anyone.
She had some moments against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Like, that fight actually wasn't very lopsided, but she just didn't do enough. There was like no sense of urgency, and she never seems to have that. Yeah.
She's a good offensive wrestler. She's a decent enough defensive fighter, which is why she stays close with everyone. But the fact that there's no offense coming out, and the idea, like, she's not going to be able to take Carla Esparza down. Even if she gets Carla Esparza down, she's not going to be able to just sit in Carla Esparza's guard and work her over there. Esparza is way too good at scrambling and at creating the positions she needs to create her own offense in a way that Lima just is not. Lima will just sit in your guard, try to push on you, and try to land short little shots that add up over the round and don't mean a lot. And I can't see her implementing that game effectively on Esparza at all. Even if she got takedowns, I just don't see her getting keeping the control. So, on that note, Esparza being favored -180 to -190, and Juliana Lima being the underdog +164 down to +145 feels really strange, considering that I see no path to victory for Lima, as like, she's not going to outstrike her and she's not going to submit her, so she would actually just have to out wrestle Carla Esparza.
Yeah, that's the real thing I'm trying to say here, is not that Lima's bad. She's obviously been very consistent. It's that, like, what is Lima actually going to do to Carla Esparza to take rounds off of her or to hurt her? She just doesn't do enough.
No, she's a very good defensive fighter and a very good wrestler. And those are enough to beat fighters that cannot wrestle. Like, that's enough to beat every fighter in that division that does not have a wrestling game. But that's not Carla Esparza.
Yeah. I mean, consider this, just to have one more mention of how good Carla Esparza's wrestling is, especially for this division. Juliana Lima very nearly out-wrestled Joanna Jędrzejczyk at several points in their fight. And Carla Esparza is way better than Juliana Lima, and yet she couldn't out-wrestle Jędrzejczyk. I think we just have to focus on the fact that Jędrzejczyk got a lot better by that point, and not draw the conclusion that Lima is on par with Esparza as a wrestler.
Well, and even if she was just on a pure straight takedown game, she's not on the level for generating offense and like actually creating meaningful round-winning offense off of takedowns.
Right, exactly.
So that brings us to Danny Roberts and Dom Steele. And this is a cool fight. This should be a fun fight because I think it'll be a good opportunity for Danny Roberts to really show something. Like he showed, he was fun in his fight over Nathan Coy. I did not expect him to get that submission at all.
Yeah, no.
But I think that this will allow Roberts to really show his striking in a fun way, because I like Dom Steele. He seems like a fun dude. He seems like a fun, he's got a solid big man power game going where he's just going to lean into you and muscle you around and throw these like really short power shots. Especially if you come in and like try to run at him, he seems to be very good at clipping people as they do that. But Roberts is just way faster and more athletic and more consistent and more diverse. Steele really depends on his boxing and on his ability to close people down and get hands on them and kind of work them over. He's not actually a great wrestler, and he's not, anything as a grappler. So he really just has to he's a wall and maul fighter, essentially. Yeah. And Roberts, that just does not seem like something Roberts is going to let happen. Even Dong Young Kim, the lesser, had moments of clinch success against Dom Steele before getting knocked out by a slam. And so I have to pick Roberts here. I think this is his fight, but I think it should be a fun action fight and maybe even a showcase.
Yeah, I got a root for Dominique Steele. He's from my hometown. And funnily enough, I actually know a guy who coached him in football in high school. And I did hear, giving me some hope for my hometown fighter, that Dominique Steele has been training in Denver. He finished his camp in Denver, so I don't know if he's at Elevation. He doesn't have much of a social media presence, so it's hard to tell where he's actually been, but maybe he's making some much-needed training camp changes. Vision MMA is a solid gym for the city, but there's just not the depth of talent you need to develop at the UFC level consistently. But, yeah, I mean, Danny Roberts he's really fast. He's very powerful. He's a very technical boxer. He believes in his finishing ability, which I think is the best thing you can say about him, because even though he is content to fight off of his back at times, he's never content. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's always looking for a way to make that an effective position. Now, that means that against some really good fighters, he will almost certainly be grounded and outworked and stalled out. Yeah. But for the time being, he's going to try to be as dangerous as possible from every position. And he is a very technical submission grappler. I mean, the way he locked up the triangle on Nathan Coy was pretty damn beautiful. Very well done, very poised, even after being taken down by this great wrestler. So Steele could definitely outwork him, but Steele has a tendency of being hurt. He's been knocked out 4 times, often really early in the fight, like he was against Zach Cummings in his debut. And Danny Roberts likes knocking people out. So I got to go with Danny Roberts by first round KO.
He's also Dom Steele is not a consistent finisher. He's got that thing where even though he's got some power in his game, he doesn't have the accuracy or the consistency with his strikes to actually apply it to get finishes.
He's a work rate fighter. He puts a ton of volume on you, and he moves around a lot. And he's Frankie Edgar without the great wrestling. You know what I mean?
and without the quickness, and without a lot of the things that make Frankie, without the great wrestling, without the quickness, and without the chin. That's
sure, yeah. But even then, like Frankie Edgar's always gotten by on having this work rate and mixing things up, and not actually being an amazing boxer like people often believe he is. And that's Dominique Steele, and he'll work the wrestling game and he'll play things off each other. But each of those threats is not as much as they are for a fighter like Frankie Edgar. Not as potent in any of those areas, especially the wrestling.
Yeah, which gives us some pretty sensible odds here. Danny Roberts is the favorite, -320 up to -370. Dom Steele, the underdog, +294 down to +245. That feels pretty right to me.
Yeah, it feels okay.
That brings us to the FS1 prelim main event. Sergio Pettis, Chris Kelades. Feelings?
This is a tough fight for me to call, actually. I think the thing with Chris Kelades is that he is First of all, we know from that fight with Paddy Holohan that he seems to fight really well when he knows he's undervalued, when he knows he's the underdog. Like, he fights with a chip on his shoulder, and he does it really well. We know about Sergio Pettis that Sergio is very, very technical. He has wonderful striking technique, wonderful submission grappling technique. He's actually not bad as a wrestler. And he has the timing to make it work even when he's lacking in some technical areas. But he seems to have weird issues with focus or concentration or like determination, something, where he just seems to waver periodically in a lot of his fights. And you can forgive him for it because he's very young. But man, it makes you wish that you could just combine the will and grit of Anthony Pettis with the technical ability of his younger brother. That'd be an amazing fighter, because Sergio is better than Anthony as far as clean technique goes. He's very, very precise, really tactical with how he employs his punches and his kicks and how he moves. Sergio Pettis, first of all, he has a tendency of slowing down and losing focus more as the fight goes on, and he seems a little fragile. He's not a great defensive fighter. Rufus sport fighters never really are, but he seems a little more hurtable than you would like, especially in a division where guys aren't hitting that hard. Like, Ryan Benoit hits pretty hard, but he's not. It's not like fighting.
Chris Carey also put fists on Sergio Pettis in the third round of that fight.
Yeah, and it's not like at heavyweight where a guy gets rocked and you're like, doesn't matter. The other guy was 260 pounds. It's a little different. You need to be able to absorb single shots like that at flyweight. And Chris Kelades is kind of
Hobart dropped him.
He did, yeah. And Chris Kelades is kind of the opposite. He's pretty damn durable, and he seems to get stronger as the fight goes on. He's a little wild early, which is his problem. He completely lacks all of that technical finesse that Pettis has. But as the fight goes on, he kind of settles into a groove and finds his range, finds his timing, and gets better round after round. And so I think that makes him really dangerous for Sergio Pettis. I do think Pettis is going to continue developing. I think he's going to pick Kelades apart and probably suffer a difficult third round and still win. I'm going to pick Sergio, but I really think Kelades is a very, very live dog in this fight.
Yeah. I think the thing for me is that I just, maybe attitude-wise and from the idea of like how they build momentum, this is a bad matchup for Pettis, but technically, I don't think it's a bad matchup for him at all.
I think it's a good matchup because like the UFC seems to have finally realized that we can't just, like, every time he gets a win, we can't try to move Sergio Pettis up. Yeah. He needs time. He's 23 and inexperienced.
22
like 22, right? Like, give him till he's 25 and then try to put him into the title picture.
Yeah, and so, with Kelades, he's not a terrible boxer, but he actually has to think about being a boxer to be good at it.
Yeah.
Like, when he tries to kickbox and when he tries to be like an aggressive striker at range, or any kind of striker at range, his game is really funky and not good. But if he can actually make himself sit down on his punches and just box, he can throw some decent strikes. Like, it's not fantastic, but it's not bad. Mostly, he's at his best when he's on the ground and he's able to get into a scramble with people, because he's very tough to finish on the ground, and then he can turn that into getting dominant positions. Like, he can scramble out of submissions and work his way through them and get his own positions and his own submission game going.
That makes this a weird matchup, because it's actually harder to imagine Kelades outworking Pettis on the ground than it is to imagine him hurting him with a shot on the feet.
And unfortunately for Kelades also, he's not a great wrestler. So the best avenue he has is the ground, but the way he tends to get there is that he tends to just kind of push guys against the fence and try to grind on them for a while. And then eventually, if they try to take him down, then he ends up on the ground where he can start scrambling. And I just don't see Pettis getting stuck. Like, I don't see him giving Kelades the opportunity to just grind him. And without that opportunity to grind, I think Pettis can pick him apart, stay ahead. If it goes to the ground, stay ahead of him on the ground, and just continually do enough to win rounds. And Kelades just doesn't have that one, like, pinpoint ability to hurt somebody bad enough to make me think that he's just going to even if he hurts Pettis, be able to finish him, you know? Like, Benoit had the power that not only could he hurt him, he could then jump on him and have real finishing ability. I could see this being more like the Matt Hobar fight, where he's not a great wrestler, but he's a pretty decent submission grappler, and he's not a great striker. And he hurt Pettis at one point, but he was never able to turn that into fight-winning momentum. So I'm kind of looking like at this like that fight. And I would even say that Hobar is a little bit more wildly aggressive than Kelades was. So
yeah, it depends. Kelades, I think he came on really strong in the end of that Chris Beal fight, but I'm always going to remember his UFC debut against Paddy Holohan and how bound and determined to win that fight he was. Granted, that was a hometown crowd for him and very short notice, but I think it had to have partially been the fact that he really knew he was an underdog, that he was not supposed to win.
And the thing with that Chris Beal fight too is that Beal's the kind of guy who is supposed to be a boxer and isn't half as good a boxer as he's supposed to be, and so he ends up having to depend on his ability to out grapple people a lot and out wrestle people. Like the hallmark of a Chris Beal fight is him getting hit really hard by somebody who's a way worse striker than him, and then having to wrestle them for the rest of the round, and maybe winning that round. But against Kelades, it was sort of like you just went into the area of this fight that your opponent is most likely to beat you. So odds on this fight, Kelades is the underdog plus 206 down to plus 170. Sergio Pettis, the favorite, minus 211 to minus 240. I'm pretty comfortable with that. Pettis does not deserve to be a huge favorite over most people given his propensity to get drops. But he should still be the favorite here.
Yeah, I agree.
And that brings us to the main card and the first fight. Another one of the few really tough ones to pick. Yair Rodríguez, Andre Fili. And I really love this fight. I remember after the last Yair Rodríguez fight, and I did a fantasy booking article for it. And this is the fight that I picked out that I wanted to see Yair Rodríguez get next, because it just feels like the perfect step up the ladder for him. Because Fili's a dude that is really hard to knock out. Really hard, never been knocked out. A knee injury early in his career. He's been submitted because he's a much more willing grappler than he is a good grappler. But the same could be said of Yair Rodríguez too. Like Yair Rodríguez has one submission to his career, and that was a triangle choke off his back. And that does not, like, triangle chokes have become way, way less common to get in the UFC. And I think Tom Grant, I was talking to him the other day, and Danny Roberts may have had the only triangle choke submission in the UFC last year.
The guard is dead, Zane.
The guard game has definitely changed a lot.
It's very different nowadays.
And so I don't see Yair Rodríguez being able to do what Godofredo Pepe or Max Holloway did and submit Andre Fili. He might. Yair Rodríguez is a very good athlete, and Holloway is not exactly some elite grappler. But Godofredo Pepe is one of those dudes that's just going to, like, throw submissions at you. Oh, and to Godofredo's credit, actually, disproving what I just said, he had a flying triangle choke over Andre Fili last year. That was his win. But that's a flying triangle. Like, I don't see Yair Rodríguez pulling that out. He's the kind of fighter who could, but Pepe is just an insane whirlwind with grappling. And
a triangle machine in particular. He's got a great triangle.
So Yair Rodríguez, I'm picking him to win this fight. And it's mostly just because I went back and watched Andre Fili's bout with Gabriel Benitez, who's a very nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes kickboxer who's going to kind of stand in front of you, look for his offensive shots, set up some basic MMA kickboxing, 1-2 low kick kind of stuff. And he had a fair amount of success against Fili. Like, he was able to catch Fili watching him a lot, to get his strikes in, looked all right. He just didn't have the diversity and creativity that Fili brought, and so he got caught way off guard by the head kick that the first head kick that dropped him, and then eventually the head kick that knocked him out. Like, he just did not have the sort of dynamic depth to be ready for all levels, and not necessarily the sort of dynamic offensive creating ability that Fili had. He's faster than Fili. And that's where I see Yair Rodríguez as a problem, is that Yair Rodríguez does have that depth of creativity, does have that flair to his game. Maybe doesn't have the same kind of nuts and bolts jab cross striking that was troubling Fili a bit in that fight. But he has the speed to be the faster fighter, the more dynamic fighter. And Fili's just not quite so good anywhere that I see him beating Rodríguez. Now, that said, this could be an amazingly close fight. Yair Rodríguez, if he doesn't finish Fili, then Yair has a tendency to flag a bit. He's, he puts so much work into all of his strikes. He's very much a, let me throw a spinning heel kick instead of a jab kind of fighter, and you throw 10 of those around, and suddenly you're going to be exhausted. But
he's very lucky he weighs 145 pounds, or else he'd have Ovince Preux levels of stamina.
Exactly. And so I do worry about that some, but I just don't think Andre Fili is the dude that is going to open that up and easily capitalize, because he tends to be a very, he can throw some creativity in there, he can throw some head kicks and some stuff like that, but he's a very much straight line, come in, throw 1-2, low kick, throw out a head kick, but he's very, very linear in his movement, and he's just not quite fast enough in his approach and not so technical anywhere that I trust Fili to just be able to be the more solid, staid fighter that grinds out Rodríguez and makes him pay for his wild style.
I do think I want to disagree with one thing you said before I forget about Rodríguez's grappling. I think his guard game is probably a little more cutting edge than guys who are playing closed guard going for submissions, simply for the fact that a lot of the problem with closed guard guys, the guys who play, arm bars and triangles and stuff like that, is that they are that is their offensive base. And that's not even the original purpose of guard, is for that to be your offensive base, right? The original purpose of guard is, oh shit, you're on the bottom. What do you do to protect yourself? Rodríguez has a really nice leg lock game, and he's very active in creating space and looking for sweeps. I think as he continues to develop and get a better sense for strategy, if he does, then he'll actually be able to rely on his guard to create opportunities. I think the leg lock game, as long as you're not a guy like Entwistle or Redmond who needs the leg lock to win, or Palhares, right? Because those guys are feast or famine fighters. They live by the sword, and they live by the knee bar and die by the knee bar. Because if you're hanging onto a leg and you're relying on that leg to get your win, you are in a terrible position if the person doesn't tap in the next 3 seconds. Yeah. But if you're using leg locks to off-balance someone and to squirm around underneath them and to sweep them and entangle them so they can't escape on the ground, that's a very viable use. That's more like the leg locks that who's the not the OG Chaz Skelly, not the OG Darren Elkins. Chaz Skelly's leg lock game is very similar, and it's very effective. He doesn't ever finish leg locks, but he uses them for sweeps really well.
And so what I should say there, it's not that Rodríguez isn't dynamic on the bottom or even smart about it. It's just that I don't think he submits Fili, and so it becomes a point of having to take a decision off of Fili. Yeah. Which is kind of the problem that Skelly had, where it's like, you're not going to finish this, so now you actually have to beat Darren Elkins in this round.
I see that, yeah. And I actually think that Andre Fili, in a limited way, is a pretty great offensive fighter. I think Andre Fili is like the heavy bag hero or the grappling dummy hero. Like, if you put a person in front of Andre Fili and they're not allowed to move and they just have to block everything he throws at them, he's going to knock them out. And if you give someone on the ground and they're flow grappling, he's going to have them in 10 submissions. I think he's got a really good head for creating and then jumping on openings.
Yeah.
But the problem is he jumps on all the openings with no regard for, is it a good idea, or, like, should I be grappling with Yair Rodríguez? Probably not. Should I be grappling with, Max Holloway or anything? I mean, that was a kind of a fight where he had no options, but.
Godofredo Pepe is the one where he just kind of, actually, the big one for him was Felipe Arantes, where he was actually beating Felipe Arantes on the feet, and then he just kept trying to take him down and got into these submission things where he did end up fighting off a submission for 2 minutes. He still won the fight, but he made it way harder on himself.
A really close, hard fight. Yeah, and that's his biggest problem, I think, is that he just doesn't have that kind of filter for what is a good tactic to actually. He sees the tactics and can't filter which ones are really viable or which ones are strategically safe. You have to imagine his scrambling and his wrestling will get better at alpha male, but also alpha male is atrophying pretty badly these days. That is becoming.
Where he's been for his whole career. So if he's gonna have that's all been built into his game already.
Yes, and the problem is that if you're a career alpha male fighter and if he's going to stay there and he seems to have a big sense of loyalty to the gym, then they have never been good at building like process-oriented fighters. They've never been really good at designing complete fighters. Dwayne Ludwig came and turned it all around, not just giving them better striking technique, but giving them hows and whys. In addition to just athletic talent and toughness. So I think that's going to be Fili's downfall here. I think Rodríguez seems to be really well trained despite coming out of a fairly small gym. I think he's aggressive enough on the ground and dynamic enough on the feet. I do think it's very likely he loses the third round because, as you said, he really slows down as the fight goes on, and he's got a kind of style where it seems like that'll always be a problem for him. So he's better tone it down or develop some real craft to survive the rough rounds as he continues through his career. But I do like Yair Rodríguez. I think he might submit Andre Fili just because I think Fili is going to be going for takedowns and stuff like that. I think guillotines and darces and stuff are going to be there. And Rodríguez has a pretty good front headlock game. But if not, then I think it's basically 2 early rounds for Rodríguez and a late one for Fili.
Yeah. It like I said, I think it's just the right step up because Fili he's dangerous. He's a decent athlete. He's a tough out, but he's not so dangerous that you're just like, oh, he can just submit Yair Rodríguez, or he can just out wrestle him, or he can just easily outstrike him. It's a building block. It's a step up. It's like, okay, this is a tough dude who's well-rounded, but he's not an elite fighter past this test. Whereas, it's a big athletic step up from Dan Hooker, basically, who just does not have that. Who did not have the athleticism to hang out with Yair Rodríguez. And I don't know that Fili does either, but Fili's a lot stronger.
Yeah, and kind of like Hooker, Fili is just a little too linear. Like he's not comfortable in that really long range where Yair likes to fight, So.
Yeah, like I said, watching his fight with Benitez, there were a lot of moments where Benitez would pop him with the jab and Fili would rush forward like 1-2 kick, and Benitez would just kind of circle out and not be there.
Yeah,
and it was only really until he started changing up his first strikes and because Benitez was sitting right in front of him when he wasn't throwing, and so it was changing up that first strike approach that got him the success in that, being a little more creative than just 1-2 low kick, but actually coming upstairs with head kicks and things like that to start out.
Yeah.
Did I read No, I did not read the odds. The odds, Yair Rodríguez is a favorite, -150 to -160. Andre Fili, the underdog, +138 to +125. That seems good to me. I mean, it could be a little longer, but I think this is a good real step up. And Fili has the ability, if Yair flags and can't put him away, Fili has the ability to just keep it on him and keep after him for 2 rounds if Yair just blows himself out in the first round. So that brings us to Robert Whittaker and Rafael Natal.
Man, Robert Whittaker is awesome at middleweight. Yeah. He's just great. I think he's got all the things he had going for him at welterweight and then some. He's basically like Dustin Poirier. I think he has reaped all of the possible benefits of moving up a weight class. He's faster than his opponents, which is great. A lot of small guys moving up have that advantage, and he does too. He seems to somehow, like Poirier, have as much or more power now that he's not having to dehydrate himself. He cracks just as hard at middleweight and seems to be hurting guys more, maybe because they're not fast enough to get out of the way. And he seems to be a little more durable too, because he's not draining himself for every weight cut. So it's awesome. Robert Whittaker is this offensive dynamo, shockingly good defense, shockingly good grappler too. That's the crazy thing. I think one of the most impressive parts of his fight with Uriah Hall was how well he did when he was on top of Hall on the ground. He was very smooth, very poised, striking, passing, even threatening a submission from back control. He was really, really impressive in the grappling department. And I love Rafael Natal. He's one of my weird journeyman favorites. I think Rafael Natal is one of those great fighters who has done a lot with very little. He is not very athletic. He doesn't hit hard. He's not durable. How many times has he been KO'd? 4?
Yeah, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 times.
So 4 KOs.
By dudes like Victor O'Donnell and Eduardo Teles too.
Yeah, not all great ones. Even like Andrew Craig, like that was a hell of a head kick, but that was like the only good thing Craig did in that fight.
Yeah, it was, and it was the only it was the only knockout of Andrew Craig's UFC run.
Right, and that's Natal's problem. But he's game. He has this amazing swagger. Often feels completely undeserved, and I think that's why I like it. Like he's in there, he's some journeyman middleweight, and he is just taunting like a son of a bitch. He is just laughing and pointing and having a great time. He's a surprisingly good boxer. He sets things up nicely with his jab. Not a great defensive fighter, but he has his moments. And he's the kind of guy who gets a lot of wins that you wouldn't expect him to get, like the Uriah Hall fight, where you're like, hey, he just hung in there and got it, you know? And I thought his fight with Tom Watson was really, really good, actually. His performance was really solid against Tom Watson, who was, I think, one of the most reliably tough opponents that the middleweight has ever seen. But that is not a recipe for beating Robert Whittaker. None of the things I just said. And I think that faulty chin is going to come back to bite Natal in a big way here. I think Whittaker's going to knock him out in the first.
Yeah, I would agree. I watched his fight with Kevin Casey just before this, and like Kevin Casey dialed him up in the first round a few times.
I was so confident that Natal was going to get the knockout, and he did, but it was very difficult to watch Kevin Casey landing on him at will. Yeah,
like Casey had to do what Casey does, which is just, blitz himself out of the fight, basically. I mean, like, Natal even shot early, and it was just kind of this ugly, way too far outside shot, and Casey just stuffed it right into the mat and returned to his feet, and it just... And Robert Whittaker's not Kevin Casey. He's not a dude who blitzes himself out of the fight. At middleweight, in fact...
Have you ever said a truer statement, Zane? Robert Whittaker is not Kevin Casey.
I know. But, like, he's a dude that for as hard as he hits and as aggressive as he is willing to attack, like, he was putting it on Uriah Hall in the last minutes of their fight at UFC 193. I think Hall was hitting him too. It was a great fight. It was a good back and forth war, but he's just not somebody that slows down. Even when Robert Whittaker is tired, he's still out there throwing combinations and putting it on guys and fighting a technical fight.
And we now realize how good Wonderboy Thompson is too, right? Like, we realize how forgivable it is for Whittaker, who seemed to be a little less durable at that weight, lost to him in a fairly competitive fight.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also just Thompson, as we've seen, has all of this cage craft and all this ring craft that a lot of MMA fighters do not have at all. Where he just really understands where he is in space at all times and how to make the best use of whatever space is around him. Whittaker is good and a very good fighter, but that's not necessarily a talent Whittaker has. Even as a good fighter, it's a rare skill. And so, we've seen Stephen Thompson knock out Johnny Hendricks, and do we think that, I think Johnny Hendricks would beat Rafael Natal.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he would.
Yeah. So this fight, it just Natal's best strength has always been that he's gonna still be there when you punch yourself out and get tired of beating him. Like that's kind of Natal's greatest strength is that you will be like, okay, I'm doing well, I'm landing some stuff, and he'll just kind of clinch you up, push you against the fence, land a few short shots, wear on you, and then round 2, you'll land a few less shots, and he'll be right in there clinching you, wearing on you. Maybe he'll get a takedown and just kind of grind on you, land a few short shots, grapple with you for a while. Then that third round comes, and you don't land anything, and he's just smothering. And that's not something that Whittaker's going to have a problem with. So I got to pick Robert Whittaker, and yeah, probably by first round KO.
One of the easier picks on the card.
A lot of the odds on this fight reasonably reflect that. Whittaker's a favorite minus 290 up to minus 350 or 380, and Rafael Natal the underdog plus 279 to plus 245. It looks like, which not a lot of value there. Maybe let's see. Is there anything on Whittaker by? Whittaker wins inside the distance is minus 120. Whittaker wins in round 1 is plus 225, but that's...
I think inside the distance is not a bad bet at minus 120.
Whittaker wins by TKO KO is minus 115, so that would probably be where you'd want to go. Not great, but better than nothing. Let's see. Fight won't start round 3 as minus 109, so you could maybe find a few ways to kind of continually whittle those odds away depending on how confident you are at Whittaker finishing early. Anyway, that brings us to Anthony Pettis, Edson Barboza, and the final really tough fight to pick on this card.
Yeah. Really tough.
It is. I'm going to just, as a basic, pick Robert Whittaker here. Or not Robert.
Robert Whittaker beats Natal and then moves on to beat both Anthony Pettis.
As a basic, pick Anthony Pettis here. Forget what I just said. I'm going to pick Anthony Pettis, and then I'll justify it from the outset. Both guys are going to get the fight they want. I think that's pretty clear. Like, this is going to be, both guys are going to get range, and they're going to get time, and they're going to get space to work. Mm-hmm. And that is the fight that both men want. And given that fight, Barboza, I don't even know that he's more creative, but he's more consistently high output. Mm-hmm. He's better able to. He has the more of the routine nuts and bolts of his Muay Thai game are just sort of functionally established. Like, okay, I'm going to throw, cross hook kick, jab, uppercut, kick, and just like some, go through all these combos and keep pace and volume on you. But Pettis at range with time is just really dangerous. Like, really more fundamentally dangerous than Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza, when he can catch you out with a huge kick that you just don't see coming, he can knock you out, obviously. He's got that ability. But Pettis isn't the kind of dude that just, does not see something coming at all. Like, he's not the kind of guy that I think just gets totally caught off guard by a big strike in the way that Terry Edom would, perhaps. Mm. And without that, Edson Barboza is much more of a, I'm going to put pace and volume on you and wear you down over rounds to beat you. That's kind of much more Edson Barboza's game. He's going to put a lot of volume on you and hit you enough that even though maybe no one of his punches are a knockout blow, eventually you'll start to get hurt and you'll start to get wobbled by shots. Whereas Pettis is much more like one punch, one really well-placed punch can put you on skates. And it could be any one punch. And I just don't think, given Barboza, I don't think Barboza's chin is nearly as bad as it got made out to be after his Cowboy fight, or his Jamie Varner fight. But it's still, Pettis is he's still really durable, and he hits really hard. And I just think in a game of range striking where Pettis is going to have all the time all the time and opportunity he needs to set up what he wants, I don't see him being the guy who gets put away.
Yeah, I see everything you're saying. That's why this fight is so hard to pick, because we have Anthony Pettis. Edson Barboza, I think we both agree, has the better process as a fighter.
Yep.
He's
improved markedly. Tons and tons.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things we have to emphasize here is how good Edson Barboza has looked in the past 2 years, despite losing to both Michael Johnson and Tony Ferguson. I kind of thought with his pressure, Michael Johnson was going to blow him out. And Edson Barboza was there and landing good shots, and I think won a round. He was very competitive. And then Tony Ferguson, had he not been Tony Ferguson, might have been asleep on the floor before he managed to get that Bravo choke, because Barboza was lighting him up with counters. He was just walking through everything. And Anthony Pettis is maybe durable enough to do that, but he's not that kind of fighter. That's the thing. Edson Barboza has had 3 fights, actually, because Felder fits this as well, against really aggressive fighters who try to close off the octagon and get in his face and pressure him. And even having lost to 2 of them, he performed very, very well. And Anthony Pettis in the same kind of matchups has been struggling lately. Even in the Gilbert Melendez fight, you could say he didn't do as well as Edson Barboza did against Michael Johnson. He just finished Gilbert Melendez, and that's the thing with Anthony Pettis. He's so damn dynamic and so accurate, and he hits hard, and he's really durable. And he's always looking for that opening, even when he's losing, even when it's a bad idea to be standing where he is. And I think that actually may be Anthony Pettis' biggest problem as a fighter. I think he knows fully how dangerous he is everywhere. And I don't think he has a sense of urgency. Because of that, I don't think he feels a sense of urgency to improve position or, either on the ground or against the cage, or to get his back off the cage, or to control the center of the octagon. I think he just thinks eventually my spot will come. And Anthony Pettis is definitely that kind of fighter where if you give him 20 rounds, like in Anderson Silva, chances that he's going to finish that a person are close to 100%. You give him enough time, he's going to find that opening. But he's only got 15 minutes. And he's got Edson Barboza in front of him, who I've been really impressed with lately. And I know Barboza's been losing, but so has Pettis. And I think Barboza's losses have looked better for him. Now, like you said, neither of these guys are going to be doing to each other what their recent opponents have tried to do to them. They're not going to be putting on tons of pressure. Even Barboza throwing more volume than Pettis is not going to put tons of volume. They're both going to want open space and rangy kickboxing. I think a couple things still are in Barboza's favor. I think Barboza is probably the harder kicker. Both guys are excellent kickers, but I also think that Barboza deals better with kicks. I don't think Anthony Pettis is actually comfortable when someone kickboxes with him. He likes to be the guy who kicks the wrestler in the head. And Edson Barboza has dealt with some really hard, really effective kickers like Paul Felder, like Lucas Martins, like Ross Pearson kicked well in the fight with him and still kicks well, like Anthony Njokuani has always done pretty well against kick-heavy game plans. And Anthony Pettis, not so much. In fact, the first guy, and I remember still when everyone said I was crazy for saying that to beat him, Rafael dos Anjos would have to kick with Anthony Pettis. But dos Anjos was the first guy in a long time who kicked with Anthony Pettis and put pressure on him with those kicks, and it worked. Because Anthony Pettis couldn't control kicking range, and he's not going to be able to control kicking range here. So I like that. I like the volume, and I like the sense of awareness of position in the octagon. I like the cage craft of Edson Barboza. Anthony Pettis has never had that. He's gotten by despite it. He could very well get by despite it here. Barboza can be hurt. Pettis is super accurate and very dangerous and a great finisher, but I think Edson Barboza takes a decision.
Yeah,
it's a very tough.
It's a tough fight to pick. It's a tough fight to pick. I think, like I said, it's one of those things where both fighters get the fight they want, and when you have 2 guys getting exactly the fight they want, and they're both at a pretty elite level, then you really have a big possibility for an upset, for the fight to go in either guy's favor.
But also, when you get that, you have to get into all this little nitty gritty, about like where are the small tactical advantages, and that makes it really easy to talk yourself into anything. You can talk yourself into anyone winning if you're dealing with all of those finite details.
Which is why I started out by just saying I think Anthony Pettis is going to win, and then like making trying to talk about it from that perspective, because I want to go with my gut on this, and instead of just trying to like infinitesimally work my way through it, because I don't know what I would come up with if I tried to do that.
There's the thrill of picking the underdog, and it's so easy to see Edson Barboza winning. So maybe I'm just a fool and I'm just walking off a cliff here, but we'll see.
The only thing I wish I had gone back and watched his fight with Jeremy Stephens, because I haven't watched that forever and I don't remember what it looked like. Because the only other fight I have in front of me that Pettis has ever had to face where he has not had to face any kind of wrestling threat at all is Donald Cerrone, where he just chewed Cerrone up with body kicks.
That's true. But I mean, Cerrone is like such a
I know. Cerrone's got a weak to the body. There's Cerrone's a very defined problem fighter, and
he's missing his squeedly spooch, and he has a horrible tendency of starting slow. So you can't.
Yeah. And so I realize that, but the problem is then that you have Eddie Alvarez, RDA, Gilbert Melendez, Benson Henderson, Joe Lozon, Clay Guida, Shane Roller, Danny Castillo. Like, you do not have a bunch of dudes that are just out there trying to kickbox with Anthony Pettis.
But that makes it really hard to know. You know what I mean? Because like you can say, oh, well, without being wrestled, he'll be able to open up.
But we don't know. We don't know.
Who's brave enough to kickbox with him? I think RDA did pretty well kickboxing with him. So
he did, but he also offered. He also offered a lot of possibilities that froze Pettis as well.
Yes. So it's just hard to say. And
whereas Barboza, I expect this to look like the Barboza-Felder fight, where both guys just got the comfortable range they wanted, and it was all about who won each exchange.
It's a lot easier to know what to expect from Barboza in this kind of fight, because Barboza has been the fun striker who gets matched with strikers. Anthony Pettis has been the guy on the title track who has to prove himself against wrestlers.
Yeah. So on that note, Anthony Pettis is the favorite, -170 to -185. Edson Barboza, the underdog, +164 to +135. Makes sense to me. I don't have a problem with that line. I think it's an incredibly close, tough fight to pick. I can see why Pettis would be favored. He's a former champ. Both guys are going to get what they want, and Barboza has progressively learned to deal with more and more of the things that have given him problems over the years. Like, every time Barboza fights, he gets better at dealing with what has classically been the holes in his game.
Yeah, and I think you have to give credit to that to Mark Henry, who I think is a really solid coach, and he's doing all the stuff he did with Frankie Edgar with Edson Barboza.
Yep. And that brings us to our co-main event: Demetrious Johnson, Henry Cejudo. And I believe you were talking first on this?
Yep.
Yes.
This fight's again, this may be the talking into thing, but talking yourself into a pick thing. But this fight became harder to pick the more I looked at it. Not harder to pick, but I started to see more ways that Demetrious Johnson could struggle with Henry Cejudo. I'm going in on the assumption that everybody knows the automatic easy pick is Demetrious Johnson, because of course it is, because he's the best. But the things that Demetrious Johnson does to win fights may not work that well against Henry Cejudo. First of all, Johnson does not typically deal with high volume strikers, and he is not a great defensive artist, Demetrious Johnson, and he tends to like the clinch, and he likes to take his opponents down. And Henry Cejudo throws a lot of volume. He's got a good nose for openings, and he's very strong in the clinch and very difficult to take down. So this could basically be like the Dodson fight, the most recent one, because Mighty Mouse has gotten markedly better since the first Dodson fight. He's no longer as reckless or easy to hurt. But it could be like a second Dodson fight if Dodson was not the maddeningly, frustratingly inconsistent fighter that he is. Like, if Dodson went out there and threw 50 punches around, because Cejudo does that more. So I do think Demetrious Johnson will win, but I think it's going to be some hard rounds for him at the beginning. I think Cejudo's going to be there. He's going to be taking what DJ throws at him fairly well. He's going to be making it very difficult to get into the clinch and to control him. He's going to be coming after Demetrious Johnson. I think ultimately Johnson, and also because Pat Wyman and I were talking about this, Demetrious Johnson is totally a bigger than the sum of his parts kind of fighter.
Yeah.
Because he's not really amazing in any phase. He's not a fantastic kickboxer. I think his grappling is pretty solid compared to his competition, but even then, like it's all about like creating transitions and shifts in position, and especially with his striking, I think he really gets by on his speed.
I would say the one thing that he is actually really very, very good at is his control wrestling.
Yes.
Because at flyweight, it is unfathomably difficult to control guys on the mat.
And he does it remarkably well.
Yeah, he does it remarkably well.
Yeah, he can hold you down even if you're a 125-pound explosive ball of muscle, and that's impressive. But, especially with DJ's striking, I think he's not actually that great a striker. His striking is connective tissue between other aspects of his game. Yeah. And Henry Cejudo is not a great striker either, but he is determined and he's tough, and he puts a lot of volume out there. I think the big downfall for Cejudo here is going to be the fact that, well, his stamina's got to suffer at some point. He's not looked bad despite his horrendous weight cut, but he's also never gone into the 4th and 5th rounds. Nobody has been able to keep up with Demetrious Johnson. I don't think anyone ever will match the ridiculous kind of endurance that Demetrious Johnson has. I don't know how he continues to go into the 30th or the 24th minute of a fight, breathing as fast as he did after his initial warm-up. Yeah. So I have no doubt that Henry Cejudo, if it goes that far, will lose the last 2 rounds. It's got to happen. Yeah. And then also Henry Cejudo being very inexperienced and very raw as a striker. He looks really great. He looks really great when he's having his way, but he does not go from defense to offense very well. As good as he is in lots of other transitions, when he's attacking, he can be countered. And when he's defending, he doesn't counterpunch himself. He's not this kind of flow fighter. He's kind of like, I set this work rate, and then you have to follow it. And he just keeps pouring it on. And against a guy who moves as much as Demetrious Johnson, who changes levels as much, who is getting better defensively, and who is always looking to attack your offense with different varied forms of offense, with takedowns and with knees and with all kinds of counters, I think that is eventually going to sap the energy from Henry Cejudo and open him up to the things that DJ really wants to do and the things that really consistently lead to him winning. So I think very close first 2 rounds. Wouldn't even be surprised if Henry Cejudo won one or both of them. And I think Demetrious Johnson takes over after that, finds his openings, and wins a decision.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would say is working against Cejudo here is that it's very hard for fighters to necessarily, well, it's going to be very hard, I think, for a fighter as inexperienced as Cejudo to figure out exactly where and how to attack Demetrious Johnson early.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where, like, he's probably going to lose the first round just kind of trying to figure out something that works. And then he might win the second as he gets comfortable, or he might be really competitive in the second, and then suddenly it's going to become an issue of cardio and Demetrious Johnson figuring him out. And the biggest problem that we've seen with Cejudo so far is that because he's such a raw talent, he has that problem of just kind of running out of ideas. Like, he'll have success with his kickboxing early, and then after a while, it's like, okay, yeah, you're fast and you're strong, but you're entering on a straight line, throwing a 1-2 every single time. And any opponent is going to get used to that. Chico Camus is going to start lighting you up in the pocket because he knows exactly what line you're coming in on and how.
You especially can't do that against Mighty Mouse.
Exactly. And that, I think, is the big problem. I said this on Prospectus, but I'm really happy for this fight because I think that Cejudo is the kind of fighter who feeds off needing motivation and on being like having a goal out in front of him that he can't accomplish. I think that is what is going to drive him for his career. And I think getting pantsed by Demetrious Johnson is exactly the kind of thing to make him just be like, fuck this, I need to beat this guy. Like, that is my absolute goal. Like, right now we know he's hungry, but if he had to, if the UFC slow played him for another couple of years and he just dominated a bunch of low level flyweights, I could easily see him starting to be like, you know what? I'm winning. It's easy. This sport's easy, and I'm doing everything I need to do, like he was on the regional scene.
Yeah.
Whereas I think he gets this fight right now while he's hungry. He gets beat by Demetrious Johnson, and then he's got a fire under him for the next few years to say, I need to come back and put it all together and really figure out how to beat this guy.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I think that the margins are too thin for him to beat Johnson. I think he's going to have to play too much catch up early with just Johnson's speed and his angled attack and his ability to come in with a variety of stuff. And then as the fight wears on, he's going to have DJ adjusting to a pretty, a good, aggressive, consistent tool set, but a pretty limited one, especially as a striker, where Cejudo just has to depend on the same few basic combos over and over and over and over again, and he can't do that against Johnson.
Yeah, because as much as I can talk about how, like the secret you didn't know about Demetrious Johnson is that he doesn't have a lot of depth to his striking, that's true for Henry Cejudo twofold. Like he's not as comfortable or as knowledgeable with striking as he appears to be against guys who allow themselves to be overwhelmed by him.
Yeah, like the reason he beat Chico Camus was not because he was a better striker than Chico Camus, and he didn't even out-wrestle Chico Camus. It's because he was more aggressive and more willing to just stand in and throw and stay on him round after round after round in a way that Camus was not comfortable being on his back foot and dealing with that kind of pressure. Basically out-pressured him for a win, and he's not going to be able to do that with Johnson. So,
agreed.
Odds on this fight, Johnson is the favorite, minus 385 to minus 440. Henry Cejudo, the underdog, plus 363 down to plus 285. That feels really short to me. I mean, I'm not, like I say, I think Cejudo will be competitive. I think it's good for him. I think it's a good fight, but it really undersells Demetrious Johnson's dominance over this division.
Yeah, I mean, it feels all right. Like, honestly, to me, I just kind of forget about anything that's any favorite odds that are beyond minus 300. I'm like, well, there's not much value. So
after that, it's hype.
At minus 400, essentially, you're just, it's hype. It's like, how can we get people to bet on this underdog? As it is here, like, Cejudo he's firmly the underdog in these odds, like very firmly the underdog. I think it's fine.
It's true. That brings us to our main event, Jon Jones, OSP. And I like this fight. I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah,
anyone who's like, OSP shouldn't be getting this fight, he's just going to get worked or whatever. You know what? Fuck you. OSP has worked his way up to the top 5 of the division, and he's getting he is benefiting from being in the right time at the right place, being winning, and them needing somebody to fight for an interim title. And who's winning at the top of that division right now? It's basically OSP. He's the guy that's winning and healthy. And he's got legit wins. He's a really, really, really good athlete, really tough dude. And
you can't please MMA fans, Zane, or fans of anything, because what the fuck else were the UFC going to do here? Yeah. Like, would they have rather had Demetrious Johnson headlining the card? Because we know the same people who bitch about OSP getting a title shot would not be happy about that, because they also hate Demetrious
They would just not
Johnson.
Watch. They wouldn't even be unhappy about it. They just wouldn't watch.
So now you get to have Jon Jones in a comeback fight, and you get to get your juices flowing. You get to have him say some inflammatory shit about the guy holding his belt. Like, perfect.
Yep. Exactly.
And you get the chance for a ridiculous upset.
Yep.
Could be,
which I'm totally cool with, you know?
Yeah.
These are the things that these fighters struggle their whole career for, is a fight, an off chance fight like this. A dude like OSP, who is not the most, he doesn't have it. He's not lighting up the screen with marketability and, You know, people haven't been clamoring for his interview for years. His way to the top is just to win and win consistently and be in the division at the right place, be ready for fights. And this is what you work your whole career for, is that off chance that you're going to be the dude that they call for a title shot when they need somebody.
He even puts on a decent performance in a loss here, and his stock goes up immeasurably.
Yep. And I think he can. I think this is the kind of performance that he can look decent in a loss because he is big and tough and aggressive. And Jones is a guy who he likes having time to work. He deals well with aggression, but you know, in his ideal world is not Alexander Gustafsson. It's Rashad Evans or Lyoto Machida. It's somebody who is going to sit out at range and be like, okay, let me give you the time to figure me out.
Yeah.
You know? Or even Glover Teixeira, where he can just kind of wrap him up and stuff him against the fence and say, you know, now what are you going to do? And there goes Connor as per usual. And I don't think that Jones can necessarily just wrap up OSP and stuff him against the fence.
Always won, Zane. Always won. I
Always
was going to say, even in the Glover Teixeira fight, I think Teixeira won at least one of those first 2 rounds. And I said that at the time. People have always disagreed, but he made it close. Yeah. And by being aggressive and getting in John Jones's face, that's the way to do it. And Cormier, like rounds, I actually just rewatching it, I was like, why do I not remember this second round being so heavily in favor of Daniel Cormier? I watched it again. I was like, he really won that round, and he may have won the first round, and he had a pretty good shot in the third round too. Yep,
it was a really close fight until Jones turned it on late and just kind of overwhelmed him. And
I mean, can you pressure John Jones long enough and hard enough to beat him? That's the real hurdle, because he's durable and he's so resilient and has such great stamina. But you know, he definitely doesn't like it.
No. And so OSP, I think he can pressure Jones. He's big and strong and powerful enough to trouble Jones in a way that other big, strong fighters have and could. You know, like he's a better athlete than Alexander Gustafsson, frankly. He's not nearly the technical striker that Gustafsson is, but Jones isn't a knockout artist. Like John Jones isn't a dude that's just going to sleep you because you're a sloppy striker. Daniel Cormier is a really sloppy striker at range. And Jones still had trouble. Like he picked at him, but he didn't actually like knock him out or hurt him.
He never stunned him, really.
No. And so I think that OSP is going to get time and opportunity, and over time I think he's going to wear down, and he makes big enough mistakes that Jones will absolutely be able to capitalize. He'll be able to, you know, to hit OSP with the kind of elbows and power shots inside and little clinch uppercuts and things like that he does so well. Probably be able to sweep and dump him to the ground and things like that with little foot sweeps and other parts of his game, the little crafty things that Jones does. But I think OSP can make this a really fun, sloppy, tough fight on Jones for a while before getting finished or just getting outworked over the last couple rounds.
I like a lot of what you're saying. But here's why I disagree with like the notion that OSP will do that stuff is I think the wrestling disparity cannot be overstated. I think John Jones is a substantially better wrestler than Ovince St. Preux. He's a better wrestler than Glover. Way better. He's a better wrestler than Glover Teixeira. He had more wrestling success than Daniel Cormier in his fight with Daniel Cormier. He is probably the very best wrestler in this division. And I guess it's easy to forget that because he hasn't been able to hold anyone down and beat them up in a while. Mm-hmm. But OSP is kind of a prime candidate for that.
This is true.
Really relies on explosiveness from the bottom. He's not going to be content to stay there, but he's going to explode to get out of it. And John Jones is really good in those transitions. When you're giving up your back to escape or when you're rolling, he's going to hit you with something on the way up, or he's going to change position to stay on top of you. I think the thing is that to me, the biggest threat actually that OSP offers in this is the fact that he is a really good counter puncher. He can counter in an exchange surprisingly well. He hits hard. He's very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got these weird, awkward shots that I think Jones may struggle to deal with. I think Jones has an easier time than ever of dealing with good straight punching, but OSP has a weirdness to him, a jankiness to his punching style that could get to Jones. But I think that once OSP lunges after Jones or something or throws a body kick at him, he's going to get put on his back. And he loves those body kicks. Boy, does he love those body kicks. And they're really effective, but, Jones is going to deal with it, I think, even better than Glover did. And I just think it's going to be the return of the elbows that we're going to see in this fight. If it ends up being a striking battle, if Jones decides to strike conventionally, maybe he feels like he did in the Gustafsson fight and he's put all this work into his boxing and he wants to strike with him, then the chance for OSP winning goes up dramatically. But I actually think it's going to be John Jones getting his first finish in a couple of years and probably TKOing OSP on the ground after taking him down several times.
Yeah, I kind of forget about Jones wrestling because he's such a wall and maul fighter. Quintessential John Jones at the elite level is wall and maul. That is him. He's going to pin you against the cage and just chip away at you with uppercuts and elbows and lean on you and make this the worst, ugliest, hardest fight of your life. And I think in that fight, I think OSP actually has a chance at being able to muscle his way off the fence a lot and to be to make that hard on Jones. But I forget about Jones being a really phenomenal technical wrestler.
You got to see how it works when Jones isn't fighting Rashad Evans or Daniel Cormier or Glover Teixeira or the shockingly skilled wrestler Alexander Gustafsson. He fights a decent wrestler defensively like Chael Sonnen, and he just mauls him on the ground. He stays there once he goes down. Or he fights a guy like Vitor Belfort, and I think OSP pretty comparable to Vitor Belfort in a lot of ways without the jiu-jitsu. So without the chance of a shock armbar. So I think his chances of getting an upset are substantially high on the feet. He's got a pretty strong puncher's chance, but on the ground, I think it's pretty lopsided.
And I wouldn't even pick, I don't even think I would give OSP much of a puncher's chance. I'm just saying that he could turn it into a sloppy fight that makes it hard on Jones for a while because Jones wouldn't be able to control him against the cage that easily, maybe because he's way bigger than Vitor Belfort. That's the kind of thing that he's way bigger than a lot of the guys that. That's
true. I think he's the same size as Jones, the same height. He's he's 6'3" or something very close.
Yeah, so he's big enough that I don't think Jones might be able to control him as easily against the fence as he has other guys. But that doesn't mean he can't just hit a foot sweep in the middle of the cage and put him straight on his ass and then work him over with elbows.
And OSP is, OSP, everything OSP does is that explosiveness in lieu of technique. So, him being big and strong, there are guys that Jones has fought, Gustafsson, where even when they get tired, they're really hard to get down, because they have the wrestling technique. Once OSP gets tired, everything goes out the window. The punching power, the knockout ability, the explosions on the ground, the takedown defense, everything gets dramatically worse once he's tired because that explosiveness, that athleticism is the basis for everything he does well.
Yep, it is true. I would not give OSP a big chance in this fight. I just think it could be. I'm hoping it's a fun, sloppy fight for a little while before Jones remembers that he should just take this guy down and wreck him. But it might just be 3 minutes long where Jones gets a body lock, foot sweep, plant, elbows, done.
Yeah.
Or even just a double picks him up and throws him.
When Jones fights that kind of guy, when he fought Chael Sonnen, he knew he was bigger and stronger and a better wrestler. He's I'm going to take him down. He did it right away. When he fought Vitor Belfort, he took him down with a single leg right away. He ended up in trouble, but I just think we've seen Jones against so many guys who are really good defensive wrestlers. And Glover Teixeira, I think, ends up being the weird one in this bunch, but Glover Teixeira is really, really good. And losing in a weird style matchup to Phil Davis does not make him less than really good. He's an elite light heavyweight and a very good wrestler. And, even he was taken down by Jones. He just couldn't be controlled.
Yep. So the odds on this are suitable. John Jones is a favorite -525 to -650. Ovince and Preux, the underdog, +501 down to +370. that seems pretty fair. As we said, anything once you get up over 300, you're just looking at hype odds, and
Yeah, it's all right. And also, I mean, Jones, the one window of opportunity for OSP here is that Jones is really dependent on full preparation in camp. We know how much security he places, how much faith he places in the security blanket of Greg Jackson and Brandon Gibson and Mike Winklejohn. So who's to say that Jones, we've not seen Jones without less than 6 weeks of preparation. So who's to say that with only 3 weeks to prepare, he doesn't look that great? Who knows?
Yeah, this is true. I mean, it'll be interesting early if Jones does not decide to wrestle. If he decides not to wrestle, this fight will be very interesting. I still think Jones absolutely wins, but it'll be a very interesting win.
Isn't that funny that that's how the fight's determined? Like, if Jones decides not to win, he may not win right away.
Yeah,
basically,
pretty much. All right. Any other thoughts on before we close the show here?
Even though we said it was easy to pick, I think there are a lot of tempting betting options on this card. I think Efren Escudero, like a really little slice. Why the hell not? At those odds, it's ridiculous. Especially him by decision at -500. That's insane. But who knows? Maybe Kevin Lee's chin is suddenly gone and he'll get knocked out by Efren Escudero. I would just go straight odds. I think Cody East is definitely worth a bet as such a small favorite. I know it's heavyweight and everything, but it's not elite heavyweight, and Cody East is an elite prospect. And I think, who else did I like? Chris Kelades, I think, is probably one of the stronger dogs on the card. I think he's got a shot. And I like Edson Barboza. A lot of underdog bets, actually, here. A lot of underdog bets.
Yeah. There's some good chances. I mean, we kind of highlighted the fights we thought were tough to pick anyway, so,
Right, yeah. Well, I also, Whittaker by KO, you said was like -115 or something?
Yeah, something like that.
That's tempting. So, that's very tempting.
Yeah. Anyway, that's your betting picks. Those are your odds. Those are our analysis. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
And I'll be doing the 6th round this weekend because you're not going to be there, right?
That's right. You can catch Connor on the 6th round this weekend. I'm taking some time off. Follow me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. Try and follow Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. Give us a thumbs up, like on YouTube. That helps us a lot. Subscribe to MMANation.com. That's where you get all our latest Bloody Elbow videos, analysis, all that good stuff. I don't think there's a fight card next week, so we will be coming at you with all our other normal shows, Prospectus, Heavy Hands, If I Did It, all that good stuff. And tune in next time. Thanks, everyone.